Education opens doors for the gospel, bringing hope to dark places and sparking lasting change around the world. At Teach Beyond, we're reaching the nations through education.
This is Transformed and Transformational, a podcast from Teach Beyond. I'm Kian.
And I'm Heather. We're exploring how the gospel transforms us and overflows to impact classrooms, communities, and the world.
Let's jump into today's conversation.
You know, Kian, not too long ago, I was at Urbana Missions Conference, and we talked about Urbana here on the podcast when we interviewed Mark Matlock back at the beginning of this season.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things when I was at Urbana that was most impactful to me were these videos that they showed in the big sessions that were all about the regions of the world. And they were pitched as if all the Christians from this region were represented in 100 people, what would the stats be? So how many would have access to electricity and internet, to secondary education, doctors, nutrition, good air quality? And then they also went into the history and future opportunities in those regions, such as the history of colonialism or the Orthodox Church or religious freedom. And it was absolutely fascinating to me.
Mm-hmm. I've seen those charts, those illustrations where it's 100 people. They're always shocking. Every time I see them, I'm surprised again.
Yeah, I was furiously taking notes, and it's really exciting because those are now available publicly. So we'll link to that in today's show notes. And I would definitely recommend watching through the videos to get a glimpse of how Christianity looks all around the world and how it's experienced too.
I'm definitely looking forward to watching those.
And the reason I bring that up is that as I was looking through the Urbana note pages, I saw that Dr. Gina Zurlo's name was in the credits as a source for the data that was used in those videos. And we had already scheduled this conversation with Dr. Zurlo, so I was really excited to be able to learn more.
Me too. Dr. Gina Zurlo is currently a senior researcher and lecturer in world Christianity at Harvard Divinity School, with a focus at the intersection of history, sociology, and world Christianity. And she is the editor of the World Christian Database.
She also edits the World Religion Database in her work as a visiting research fellow at Boston University, which is where she earned her PhD.
Dr. Zurlo was named one of the BBC's 100 most influential and inspiring women back in 2019 for her work in studying religious statistics and specifically the female future of religion worldwide.
Yeah, and her most recent book is on that topic, Women in World Christianity, Building and Sustaining a Global Movement.
In our conversation today, we're talking with Dr. Zurlo about the most recent update to the World Christian Database that were released at the beginning of 2026, as well as the trends she is seeing in global missions and how this can impact how we see what God is doing around the world.
Whether you're also into numbers and statistics or this type of topic is brand new for you, I'm excited for you to be joining us for this conversation.
Let's go over to Dr. Zurlo now.
Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Zurlo.
Thanks so much for having me.
Hi, we are so excited to have you and to dive into this conversation about the World Christian Database. And as we get into it, I'm curious, what drew you to data? Are you somebody who just loves data, or is there something else that drew you to this field?
Yeah, so I think no little girl, or very few little girls, say, I want to be a demographer of religion when I grow up. But that is what I ended up being through lots of twists and turns in life. As a child, I was always really interested in what was happening around the world. An example of this is my favorite cartoon when I was little was the Animaniacs, when Yakko did the Countries of the World song. I actually showed it to my husband the other day, and we had this wonderful millennial moment of going back to the 90s and watching this Countries of the World thing. And it just showed that I was always interested in what was happening around the world, other peoples, other languages, other religions. And so when I went to go do my graduate work, I encountered the work of the World Christian Database, which at that time was run by my now colleague, Todd Johnson. And he came and gave a guest lecture in one of my courses, and it was all the maps, charts, stats. And I immediately fell in love with it. And I said, this is the thing I want to be doing. And that was in 2007. And I'm still here. And now I'm running the World Christian Database project. So now I definitely am a data person.
Yeah, that's such a fun story to hear how, there were those twists and turns that brought you to this time. You can look back and you can see it, all arrows pointing in this direction, and now you're leading that project. So maybe for those who aren't familiar, can you describe what the World Christian Database Project is?
Yeah, so the World Christian Database and its sister project, the World Religion Database, are the most comprehensive online resources for membership and affiliation data of every religion in every country of the world, and Christianity down to the denominational level. So these databases have been running continuously since 1965, and they are grounded in the largest global census of religion and non-religion that was ever undertaken in the world, that we have been continuing since the 1960s. So these are the only databases that can tell you with reasonable confidence how many Pentecostals are in Argentina, how many Baha'i are in Iran, how many Christians are in China. You name it, we are trying to figure out what's happening with religion on the ground all around the world.
That's amazing. It also seems so overwhelming. I don't even know how you can you tell us how you go about collecting that type of data, especially at such a granular level?
Yeah, it's a massive project. I really cannot overstate that enough. It's a huge project, and every day I'm in a different country of the world, gathering new data, figuring out what's happening. And a lot of the data collection comes from three major sources. So the first is government censuses, right? Most countries perform a census every 10 years. And so about half of the world's countries ask a religion question. So we can gather all that data on religion. But even for those who don't ask a religion question, we're gathering data on languages and ethnicity, country of origin, migration, because we know that where people are on the move worldwide, they're bringing their religion with
Yeah,
them. And there's a
yeah,
lot of ties between religion and ethnicity in the
yeah.
world. So
Mm.
census data collection is a huge part of this project. The next source of data is social science surveys. So that's material from, say, the Pew Research Center, from the
Mhm.
Afrobarometer, from the World Values Survey. There's all kinds of surveys happening all over the world all the time. So we're paying attention to what those findings are. And then the third piece of data is what makes this project distinct is that we gather institutional data from religious communities. So we have a massive data collection of Christian denominational data from the denominations themselves. So we gather all the data from the Catholic Church, we gather the data from the Episcopals, the Presbyterians, the Baptists, you name it. We're trying to track you down to figure out what's in your annual report this year.
Yeah.
So then we gather all the data, we weigh the validity, we triangulate the data, and we come up with our best estimates for
Mhm.
every religion and every denomination.
How big is this team that's working together on this project?
Not as big as I would hope for the size of the research
Yeah, yeah.
agenda, admittedly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So myself and Todd Johnson and Peter Crossing as our database analyst are the only full-time people on
Oh,
the
wow.
team right now. We have graduate research assistants
Yeah.
who are working on their master's programs, who do a lot of the data collection with us. And we've got other part-time people and kind of ad hoc people here or there. But the thing that makes this possible is not this little team in Boston who are updating all these data and collecting material. It's this huge team of global contexts. So we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that we reach out to in every country of the world to say, hey, here's what we're thinking about with our analysis of religion in Singapore. You're an expert in Singaporean or Southeast Asian religion. Tell me what you think about this. And so that kind of feedback mechanism is absolutely critical because we don't just want to report what the world looks like from my little chair in Boston. I want someone in Singapore to look at the Singaporean data and say, yeah, that does look like my context. That is the goal of what we're doing.
That's amazing. And it's obviously a lot of work. It's a huge effort to undertake. So I'm just curious, as you're looking at this, as you're doing this job, what are you what are you excited about? Like what's the benefit of researching these types of large numbers? How does this inform people decisions that people can make based on these numbers?
So, in social science research, we have this phrase that goes garbage in, garbage out, which is if you put bad data into some kind of process or a formula or a decision making process, you're going to get bad stuff out, garbage in, garbage out. And I don't want to produce garbage. So, I am
Yeah.
really committed to producing the highest quality, most comprehensive, reliable data that I possibly can, because I know that people are using these data to help inform decisions that their
Yeah.
organization is doing. And I take that responsibility quite seriously. So my responsibility is to make sure that data is as solid and sourced and transparent as possible so that other organizations who are using it and other researchers who are using it in conjunction with other kinds of data are getting the best possible result.
So recently there was a new report released from the World Christian Database. And as you looked at those numbers, I'm curious what kind of things stuck out to you, notable differences or changes that happened to you, or maybe when you talk to other people that they're surprised by you, you're familiar with the numbers, you're not surprised by it, but when you tell people they don't expect it.
I'm always surprised by our own numbers.
Okay.
This is the fun of doing
That's
numbers.
cool.
It
Yeah.
is there's a lot you can control, right, on this end of things, but sometimes the numbers surprise you. So the report that just came out is what we affectionately call the annual statistical table, and you can download a free copy of the annual statistical table at worldchristiandatabase.org. But this article is published every year in the International Bulletin of Mission Research, and it gives you a snapshot of what's happening in world Christianity today. So this is the 2026 table. And one feature of, really the main feature of this year's annual statistical table is that we added our future projections for 2075. And I know 2075 might seem like it's really far away, but it's not. And
Yes.
this is what demographers do. We forecast. So if all things remain the same, this is what the world will look like in the future. Now, everybody knows that the world never stays the same.
Yeah.
But if it did, this is what it would look like. And so one thing that I added to the analysis for this year were some more contextual factors with what's happening in the world, because religion, Christianity, does not exist in a vacuum, right? Christians are living in a society with all kinds of things going on, which impacts faith and practice and Christian self understanding in the world. So we added this year to the annual statistical table the number of refugees in the world, the amount of carbon dioxide emissions in the world, infant mortality rates, and rates of secondary education. And I chose these variables, one, because there's good data available, because we want good data, not garbage
Right.
data. And these are things I want Christians to think about in the world. I want them to think about refugee populations and the movement of peoples and the needs that exist in those communities. I want Christians to think about environmental issues and the climate crisis, which, in my opinion, is the most global issue of our day, because what happens in one place in the world directly impacts people in other places around the world. Infant mortality, of course, we want babies to live. This is a really important thing all around the world. And secondary education, we want people to flourish, and a way to flourish, a key way to flourish, has been secondary education. So we added these variables to have people think a little more broadly about what it means to be a person of faith in the world. It's not just what you believe, it's not just the church you go to, it's this broader context.
Yeah. Yeah. And the impacts that that has in the society. Were there any that you had hoped to be able to add or thought about adding, but there wasn't strong enough data, or that, it just didn't seem relevant enough to include?
Yeah, so a lot of these variables we track in the World Christian Database, and they come from sources like the United Nations or the World Bank or the World Economic Forum. The one problem we ran into is it's hard to project these data.
Hmm.
So we know, say, how many refugees are in the world today, but how does anyone project how many refugees could
Yeah.
be in the world in the future? I mean,
Right.
that's nearly impossible because they're
Yeah.
caused by these different geopolitical contexts. Nobody knows when the next civil war is coming,
Yeah.
and things like that. So that was a challenge in adding the new variables.
Hmm.
I really wanted to add a gender variable. So we do have
Hmm.
gender gap information in the World Christian Database. But I mean, at some point, we only have so much space on the page, and you got to make decisions about what's in. But there's a full list of really important socioeconomic gender variables in the World Christian Database.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. So thinking about the new things that were added and the things that, you've been updating over time, what were things that surprised you or that you think should be highlighted for others to take note of in those trends?
So, one of the key facts of the World Christian Database that it has always rested on is the demographic shift of Christianity to the global south. This is really one of the underlying truths of the whole discipline of world Christianity studies is that Christianity is no longer a Western religion demographically, and there are more Christians living in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and Oceania. So I think most people in this field are aware of that. One of the most interesting findings from the addition of the 2075 data is the near reversal of the proportion of Christians who live in the global north versus the global south. So in the year 1900, 18% of Christians lived in the global south, Asia, Africa, Latin America, and Oceania. But by the year 2075, 18% of Christians will live in the global north,
Mm-hmm.
Europe, and North
Mm-hmm.
America. We did not plan that, that it would be this like perfect reversal over the 100, over that span of time, 1900 to 2075. And so this has a lot of implications for what it means to be a Christian in the world today, that by the year 2075, 47% of all Christians are likely to be Africans. So, what does that mean for mission, for theological education, for what Christians do with their money, for how churches work in the world, the kinds of things they're interested in? The implications of this are endless, really.
You've got my wheels turning about what different organizations or next steps might run with that data. And that's probably the neat part for you, is that you're presenting this data in a way that it can then be, the decisions are made off of that, the next steps are taken, but it's not prescriptive, like you should do this with this data. This is just information, and then you can take it and run with it in the direction that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people look to us for more prescriptive
Yeah.
instructions, but that's not what we do. We
Right,
provide
right.
data and we provide some analysis of the implications of that data,
Yeah.
but really you need to decide for yourself and your own organization,
Hmm.
and the missions and goals and values that you have.
Hmm.
How are you going to respond to the new demographic reality of world Christianity?
Right. As you've interacted with your contacts and the people you're partnering with in countries in the global south, what has been their response to that rising number of Christians in the global south?
Yeah, so you get kind of mixed responses. So you get some people who say, well, yeah, of course. Of course, this is what's happening. The West is abandoning religion,
Mm,
right? Like Christianity is declining in Australia, New Zealand, and in Europe and North America. You're all abandoning the faith and becoming secular, blah, blah, blah. And we're holding true. Okay, fine. There are other people who say, okay, that's maybe true demographically, but we don't feel like it's true in other ways.
mhm,
So, yes, Christianity has shifted demographically. So, like the people power is now in
mhm,
the South, but is the theological power in the South? Is the decision making power in the South? Is the theological education in the South? Is the way we conceptualize Christian history in the South? Arguably, no, right? So, even just thinking economically, so Christians of the global south generally are less resourced than Christians in the north. So we have this huge power imbalance, frankly, where more of the Christians live in the south, but most of the Christian wealth is still in the north. So what does that mean? How do we handle that? Should Western Christians just be giving money all over the place and not doing anything themselves, or there's still a lot of questions about the economic implications here that are really uncomfortable, frankly, to talk about and really messy at an institutional level.
Yeah. There's a lot to dive into there with, yeah, decision making in the different areas and how that all goes together. Um, I'm curious, as you're looking at these numbers also, are there any other trends you see relating to kind of missions? What would a mission organization see as far as like, things like unreached people groups, lack of gospel access? Does that come into the data at all?
Yeah, so the World Christian Database tracks different trends related to mission and gospel access because mission and gospel access is a thing that most Christians in the world care about, especially as Christianity continues its demographic shift to the South. Global South Christians generally care quite a lot about things related to mission and gospel access. So we'll continue to track these trends as long as it's something Christians are interested in knowing the trends about. So, but a lot of the data on missions, admittedly, is very difficult to come by. So, ironically, it was actually easier to track trends in mission when my predecessor, David Barrett, started the World Christian Database Project back in the 60s than it is now for me today. Because back in the 60s and 70s, David Barrett could just call up all the Western sending agencies and gather all of their statistics that they were publishing every year and tally them up and tell you how many missionaries are in the world and where they're going. I can't do that now because missionary sending is so diffuse. It is not, it's less institutional. And there's so many different ways of understanding, quote, who is a missionary today. So I'm really struggling with this, frankly, at the World Christian Database of redefining how to operationalize what mission even is. So one thing we're thinking a lot about is the connection between missions and migration. And I have to mention my friend and colleague, Harvey Kwiani, who's a Malawian missiologist who's doing a lot of work on what it means to decolonize mission in light of a majority South global Christianity and what it means when Christians from the global South migrate to these secularizing Western, mostly cities. What does it mean? Are they missionaries? What kind of mission are they doing? What do these congregations look like? What does it mean for the host country? What does it mean for the migrants of faith? Right, like lots of questions there that we are still figuring out what these dynamics are going to look like.
Yeah, I really appreciate the acknowledgement that, yeah, this is not easy or simple to collect, to define the different pieces of that I resonate with what you're talking about. And so it's great to know that someone whose job is demography is also wrestling with that as well.
During the month of March, Teach Beyond is focused on the ways we serve with and work alongside those in the margins. Teach Beyond's Each One Matters campaign exists because every learner deserves the same chance.
You can learn more about how Teach Beyond is reaching students with hope-filled, life-changing education and how you can be part of that by clicking on the link in the show notes or by visiting teachbeyond.org/each one matters.
And now for a story from the field as we are working with those in the margins.
Truly, the first will be last and the last will be first. In 2019, Beyond Borders members met an Iranian family consisting of the parents, a daughter attending university, and 2 sons attending Greek public secondary schools. The parents and daughter attended the Beyond Borders English class. The following year, the mother, who was a new Christian and the only one in her family, confided in us that they had 3 asylum rejections and were threatened with imminent deportation. We prayed for her and told her to trust Jesus. Some way, somehow, he would come through for her. Her faith was weak, and she needed anxiety medication just to function. Fast forward 2 years later, her oldest son graduated from Greek public school after being in the country and learning the language for only 4 years. He received the highest academic score in all of Greece. He was lauded on national television and social media by the Greek president and prime minister and given a full university scholarship, to the utter amazement of Greeks witnessing the scripture truth of the last will be first and the first will be last. This family is currently living in Athens with their university son, and the Greek government have not uttered a word to them about deportation. Last summer, their youngest son, who had become a Christian, graduated from high school. Beyond Borders employed him as a summer teacher assistant for our education program for undocumented refugee children, fearful of attending public school. This younger son prayed over our meals in the name of Jesus. He was an encouragement to the younger refugee students, inspiring them regarding faith in Jesus and the possibility of university education. Hallelujah.
And now back to our conversation with Dr. Zurlo. You mentioned church Christians are interested in like the unreached, lack of gospel access. I'm curious, do you guys define what gospel access means, and how do you define that?
So this is a bit of a debate within the field of mission and gospel access of what does it mean to have gospel access. So first I want to say the World Christian Database doesn't use the language of reached and unreached. We've never used that language. It's not up to us, frankly, again, a little team in Boston to decide what it means for someone to be reached or unreached, or how reached, or levels of reached. I really, even though I love data and I am a quant person, I'm very cautious against the over quantification of mission, because mission is a human thing. It's a very relational thing. And I think a lot of the missiometric movement from mostly the US has over quantified things. And we've lost kind of the relational human aspect of it. And by checking off lists of people groups, right? There's just something that doesn't feel right about that to me. I'd rather go back in history and look at historical women in mission who took a much different approach to mission than checking names or lists of people off a list. They were very much about activism and social justice and education and health, and really pioneering works around the world at a very human relational level to provide people things they needed and wanted, and doing that from a Christian spirit and sharing the gospel at the same time. So that's kind of the spirit that I would love to see kind of the mission world move into. Um, Now, all that being said, we can tell you where all the Christians are in the world, and we can essentially put together different kinds of variables that give indications of where people have more or less access. But we ourselves are actually moving away from reporting exact figures, like this people group has this percent access. We are more moving towards a system of essentially low, medium, and high. Where do people have the most access? Where do people have moderate access? And where do people have low access, based on things like scripture availability, based on where Christians are, based on where different justice ministries are oriented, or things like that. So we're trying to give more of a big picture than very detailed, granulated data.
You mentioned the role of women in missions, and I know you've done research specifically highlighting that in global Christianity. And so I'm wondering, what are some key ways that you see today that women are shaping the church and global Christianity today?
I am going to make a bold statement that
Okay.
there would be no church without women. And it's actually not that bold. Any historian will tell you that there would be no church without women. From the New Testament through the early centuries of Christianity, women were there making sure that people heard the Christian message. They were converting their non Christian husbands to the faith. They were raising Christian children. They were doing the good works. They were helping people survive plagues so that literally Christians would just survive when non-Christian communities were dying out, right? So there's just, women are so central to so much of what we know and understand about Christianity today, and yet most people have no clue, because women are often working on the edges, on the margins, behind the scenes, and they're keeping things going in these invisible ways, sometimes with credit, sometimes with no credit. So there's a lot of challenges as it relates to this topic of women in world Christianity. Um, and you can really think of it as women are literally doing everything. Um, and there are a lot of places in the world where women feel called to do and have certain roles in churches, but because of tradition, because of biblical interpretation, because of culture, they're told that those callings are not right. And so women are navigating a very different world, frankly, than men are. Most people don't question men's callings the way that women's callings get questioned. So there's still a lot of obstacles, but women are not just victims. When denied a seat at the table, they make their own tables. When denied opportunities for preaching, they're exercising all kinds of soft power in churches that are sometimes more influential than the big man at the front of the church. So women are really creative in how they navigate all the different contexts that they exist in.
Yeah. And you mentioned cultural aspects to that too. And certainly that's maybe even more complex than some of the you can preach versus you can't preach theological debates. And then there's the cultural norms that get overlaid on that in various different countries. And so it's fascinating to hear you talk about the different ways that they've created their own tables, like you said.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you bring that up, because it's so important for us to not impose our own understandings and our own concepts of gender roles and whatever it is on other places around the world. Right? I'm a middle class white woman living in Boston. I have a very different understanding of what women can and should be doing in the world than a Pakistani woman living in a rural area of the Punjab. Right? Like that's a very different context for her there. So we need to be very sensitive to those differences while at the same time recognizing that, you know, the gospel can transform cultures
Yes,
and there are things historically that missionaries fought against that helped women, like foot binding in China and widow burning in India and offering girls education. These are objectively good things that,
hmm
you know,
hmm
missions were advocates of. So that we need to leave room for cultural transformation at the same time.
Right.
As we're talking about this kind of topic of theological stances and maybe specific issues, do you track that along with these numbers? I feel like that would get really complicated with each church doing different things regardless of denomination. So maybe that's not even possible.
No, we don't.
Yeah,
We
that makes
don't.
sense.
And really the reason I don't is one, I've got so much to do, but also I'm not a trained theologian, right? Like I know I'm studying church communities, but I'm a historian and I'm a social scientist, and those are the lanes I really try to stay in. I like to keep it facts, empirical, data, archives, methods. That's my expertise, and we'll
Right.
leave the other stuff for the biblical studies people and the theologians.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. I'm curious, as you've looked at kind of these numbers and global trends, have you seen any role that religious persecution might play in Christianity growth or shrinking in different countries and regions?
Yeah, so that saying has been around forever, right? The blood of
Hmm.
the martyrs is the seed of the church. I'm not
Mm.
sure that's true.
Mm.
Actually, I had a research assistant do a project on it, an empirical stats project to see if that was actually true in the data, and it's
Hmm.
not because it's just so complicated. That statement is so simple, and the reality is
Mm.
so complicated about under what conditions does Christianity grow in a place. Well, most of the Christian growth, most of the religious growth overall is just birth rates. So this is me in my demography hat,
Hmm.
right? Which this is just basic demographic reality that most religions are growing now because of differences in birth rates. So Muslim families have more children on average than Christian families, so Muslims therefore are going to grow faster than Christians. So that's kind of the demographic reality part. For Christians, because there is this missional, evangelistic element to the faith, okay, under what conditions do people convert to Christianity? This is a very difficult thing to ascertain, and it's going to look different in different places around the world. So
Right.
the
Yeah.
conditions under which people become Christian in Iran are very different than in Nepal, right?
hmm
Um, so those two examples being two of the places we think that Christianity is actually growing the fastest through conversion, not just through birth rates,
hmm
but for very different reasons. Like in Iran, it's this underground church. There's a lot of political dissatisfaction with Islam and the regime, and a lot of Iranians are looking for other kinds of religion and spirituality to kind of fill that gap. In Nepal, very different context. Newly moved from a Hindu monarchy to a secular democracy. A lot of rural areas have adopted Christianity. There was a massive humanitarian crisis with the earthquake, and a lot of Christian mission came in to kind of fill that gap through a humanitarian lens. So, you know, does persecution help the church grow? I don't know. Nobody can say for sure whether it does or doesn't.
Yeah.
In some places, I'm sure it does. In other places, I'm sure it doesn't. That's, I think, the only honest answer that you can have to that question.
That is so interesting. You mentioned the Nepal government change, and I don't know if you can kind of keep track of who's says they're Christians and may or may not believe it, because like when the government changes their religion for the nation, does that all of a sudden shift? Everyone moves into that column now that that's the government's stance.
I'm so glad you asked this because this is one of my favorite demography stories so far of my life is Nepal.
Fantastic.
So
Great.
the census in Nepal asks a religion question, and it said that Christians were about 1% of the population in Nepal. But Christian communities on the ground were saying, no, we're like 8% of the population.
Huh.
That's a big difference.
Yeah.
So I happened to have a research assistant several years ago who grew up in Nepal, and he was
Okay.
going home for Christmas break, and he's like, hey, while I'm there, should I like talk to some people? And I was like, sure, talk to people, see what you
Yeah.
can find out about what's happening in Nepal. And so he ends up talking to extremely prominent people. I realized later his family is like very well connected in Nepali Christianity. And they told him, hey, we did this study of Christianity in every province of Nepal. Do you want to see it? And he's like, do I want to see it? Of course I want to see it. And so what they did is they trained 300 undergraduate students in research methods and sent them out to every single province of Nepal to visit
Wow.
every single church to count how many people are in every church and how many leaders are in every church. And not just overall numbers, they did a gender breakdown of how many men and women were in every church and how many men and women leaders. It's actually one of the most detailed gendered studies of Christianity anywhere in the world.
Wow.
And so that report showed that Christians were, I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but larger than the census. I think they said like 2.3%.
Okay.
So not nearly as high as the 8% as people said they were, not as low as the census, which undercounted religious minorities in the census. Because just because you move officially from one thing to another doesn't mean, right, that there's
Yeah.
still not state-supported religion. But the problem was that report from the Christian community didn't include Catholics as Christians and some other groups as Christian. So then that's where I came in. I said, okay, the census says this, the on the ground community survey said this. Okay, the World Christian Database says something else,
Okay.
because we think Catholics are Christians, because anyone who self identifies as a Christian is counted as a Christian. That's
Got it.
our sociological gold standard. So how many Christians are in Nepal? Well, it depends if you ask the census, if you ask the religious community, or you ask the World Christian Database. You're going to get three different answers to that question.
Right. Oh, that's fascinating. You know, we were talking about the movement of people. We talk now about change in leadership, and there's so many changes that are also just unpredictable, whether that's, you mentioned earlier, war or other factors. So I'm just struck by, going back to the 2075 projections that you've made, the number of things that could happen that aren't expected is vast. So I guess, compared looking back, how accurate have past projections been? And then looking ahead, do you try to account for some of those things? Or is it, it's just going to be what it's going to be with this growth rate, or with this, what we know now, and probably it's going to be inaccurate because of various factors? Like, how do you account for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm going to give you two historical examples to answer your question.
Okay.
So at the Edinburgh 1910 World Missionary Conference, the greatest missiological minds of the Western world came together to talk about what the future of Christianity in the 20th century could possibly look like. And in 1910, they decided that Asia is where all the Christian growth was going to be. They thought Asian societies were very advanced. They thought they would adapt to the Western scientific method, which not quite sure the connection to Christianity there, but that was part of their rationale. And so they thought, surely Asia. They called Africa the, quote, dark, backward, pagan continent. They said there was no hope for Christianity in Africa at all. Well, look at us now, where 49% of the African continent is Christian and only 8% of the Asian continent is Christian. So the greatest minds of the early 20th century completely misdiagnosed the growth of Christianity in the world's largest continents. So that gives you one idea of how future projections can go. The second historical vignette comes from the 1960s and 70s. So this is the time where, quote, God is dead, right? Where the West is secularizing rapidly. And a lot of social scientists were saying that, religion was dying out because they're sitting in their offices in Germany and the United States and London, right? Thinking no one here is religious. And very famously, a sociologist named Peter Berger said, By the 21st century, religious communities will only exist in small groups huddled together to resist a worldwide secular culture. It's
Wow.
very dramatic.
Yes.
But David Barrett, the guy who founded the World Christian Database, was in Nairobi, Kenya, and he was looking around and said, "This looks like a pretty religious place to me. And I think Africa is going to have 350 million Christians by the year 2000." Now, of course, David Barrett was right. There was actually 370 million Christians in Africa by the year 2000. Peter Berger was very wrong. And in 1997, Peter Berger recanted his position.
Wow.
And he said, "I think what I and other social scientists wrote in the 1960s was a mistake." The greatest act of academic humility that has ever existed is when Peter Berger recanted. And then, in a wonderful full circle moment, helped us establish the World Religion Database at Boston University. So Peter Berger really leaned in and said, "Actually, I think these guys know what they're talking about. The world is a religious place." And so these two examples show your positionality matters a lot in how these future projections are portrayed. So I've taken those clues from history to try to not make those mistakes. So if all things remain the same, this is what it will be. But we know all things will not remain the same. I know there's going to be a natural disaster. I know there's going to be a political coup. I know there's going to be changes in birth rates and death rates and all that change populations. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to do the projections anyway. I'm still going to do the projections with all the caveats connected to them.
Yes. And there's a reality that religion and specifically Christianity, it's about a relationship too. And so there's the reality that there's the power of the Holy Spirit growing things and working outside of the bounds of what might make sense too. So there's that element of growth that can only be attributed to the miraculous work of God in people's lives and through individuals. So there's that element too, that we have to hold the mystery of God at work in the data, right? I know that's probably
Yes.
hard to say to a person who loves the numbers, but
Yeah, I can't exactly quantify that, but
right.
I can accept that it's still a reality
Yes.
nonetheless.
Yeah. Well, right now, this year, Teach Beyond is launching a strategic initiative through 2040, which for us feels like really far from now. So 2075, I honestly can't even imagine. But as we're looking ahead to 2040 and maybe even slightly beyond, if that's easier to work with, what would you say that you're forecasting about the future of Christianity that we should be taking note of as we're doing our own work within the space of Christian education?
Yeah, so this demographic shift is continuing. I really cannot foresee a future that the shift reverses in any way. It may slow down or kind of bottom out at some point, but the shift is continuing. So part of that means that more Christians are living in very multi religious settings. Both Christians in the global south who live, like all those Asian Christians who live in very, very religiously diverse places, South Korea, Singapore, very religiously diverse. But even Christians in the West still, our contexts in the West are becoming more religiously diverse. So interreligious education, interreligious dialogue, interreligious encounters, I think are the most important things we can be doing in the educational space. And not just reading about people of other religions through books and stuff, which are great. Read the books, watch the TikToks, do whatever, fine. But have personal encounters with people of other religions. That I cannot overemphasize how important it is to humanize someone of another religion. Hey, we're both just mothers trying to raise our children. Hey, we're both just people trying to figure out how to do good in this world. Hey, we're both just communities trying to feed our people or protect our neighbors, right? There's a lot of human connection among people of faith that a lot of Christians frankly lose sight of because of theological differences. So I would love to see more Christian educational initiatives take interreligious education more seriously.
It's interesting how you can like not experience something personally and it doesn't affect you. And then you realize like 2 billion people in the world have this experience where kind of those relationships do matter. realizing kind of where I'm sitting, what I see is different than what 5 billion, 2 billion, whatever number of people actually experience. And that's very humbling and shocking kind of as you process it.
Yeah, and if Christianity really is a global family, which I think it
Mhm.
is, I
Yeah.
want to know what my Christian brothers and sisters are experiencing in other places around the world. A lot of Christians are experiencing Christian Muslim violence in some of the places where Christianity is now the majority and growing the fastest. So I need to have empathy. I need to be able to pray. I need to have understanding about the real facts on the ground in order to, really be a part of that global family. Right? When one suffers, we all suffer. So education, I think, is the gateway for that.
Well, we've looked at a lot of data points, stories from the past, projections to the future. So, if we could kind of bring this down to a practical next step, I'm known around here for something practical here, Dr. Zurlo. So, if you could leave us with one encouragement or one challenge or something practical based on the data, what would that be?
It's really important to know where the data come from. So I encourage all kinds of decision making should be grounded in data, but you have to know where that data comes from. I'm a big advocate of quantitative intelligence. I don't expect people to know how to run stats. No, no. I expect people to understand what the right questions are of the data that you're consuming so that you don't put bad data into your decision making. So just asking a few questions: who produced this data? What kinds of methods do they use? What are their data sources? Just ask them, right? Or God forbid, read the methodology document that comes out with all of these studies that we produce. We write lots of information about how the stats come together. Read it. Become an
Yeah.
intelligent consumer of
Mm.
quantitative data. It will mean so much more to you, and you'll be able to use the data more effectively that way.
Hmm. That's great. A good challenge for us to take the next step. So, thank you so much for making time to be with us and for sharing so much from your research, from your involvement in this. It's been really encouraging, enlightening, and challenging for us.
Before we let you go, we have one last important question. And that's, what is one thing that's changing your life? So this is something, it can be big, small, it can be personal, whatever you want to wherever you want to take it. I'll go first, then Heather, and you get to go last. So you get a little bit of time to think about it. What's changing my life is I've started doing a morning checklist for work. Is like I come and sit down and I have a list of 10 things and I have to check off everything just to start my day. And it's been
Nice.
great. It's been really helpful to kind of start the day off right with getting the things done before just diving into the inbox and being overwhelmed. So I've been
Yeah.
really enjoying that. And that's been changing my life recently.
That's great. Is this like the same things everyday routine, or is it these are the things I need to get done before I check email, just different every
It's the
day?
same thing every day, except I
Okay.
have something unique on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So like
Oh,
a few
okay.
additional things depending on the day of the week.
Nice. That's cool. I like that. Um, what's changing my life lately? I think I've shared before that I've gotten into studying the working genius model on like kind of working how you bring yourself to your work. And I've just had a resurgence in using that, not only doing some trainings at my church, but also with my friends and my family. And so having that common language of like, what is your style of work? What are kind of the natural things that bring you energy versus what's frustrating to you has been an interesting discussion in a personal context, because it's been coming up more in work before, but it can have implications in the family and with friends too. So I've been enjoying having that kind of flow out of work and into my personal life too. So that's been changing my life. What about you, Dr. Zerlo?
So, for many, many years, I was a runner and I loved running. It was like part of my identity, especially winter running with that cold air in your
Oh.
chest. It felt so good. But I got a back injury a couple
Oh,
years ago and I haven't been able to run. But over the last couple weeks, I've been getting back into running and it
oh,
is really giving me life and energy to kind of reclaim this thing that I haven't been able to do in a long time that I really, really enjoy. So it's bringing me so much joy to pound the pavement and get back into
yeah.
running.
Yeah, that's great. That's good to hear, because it probably means that your injury is healing, but also to bring back that life-giving thing that you love to do. So that's
Yes, as
great.
long as I'm very careful.
Yeah,
Yes.
there you go.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for joining us. We really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you.
It was so great to talk with Dr. Zurlo today. I loved hearing her passion for good data and how that can be so important to understand world Christianity, especially her comment on how the church is a body, is one family. And it's just so important to learn more and more about our family, about the fellow Christians we have around the world.
Absolutely. And don't forget to check out those resources in the show notes to learn more about the World Christian Database and to access the videos about global Christianity.
Heather and I serve with Teach Beyond, a mission organization reaching the nations through education.
Want to learn more and get involved? Visit teachbeyond.org or follow us on social media.
To help more people find the podcast and hear about Teach Beyond, we'd love it if you would leave a rating or review and share the show with a friend. Be sure you subscribe or following the show on the platform where you listen so you never miss an episode.
And as always, you can reach us at podcast@teachbeyond.org. We'll see you next week.